So I just want to welcome everyone to OUP's EIR and MIR Programs at Universities webinar. I'm Jamie Testi of Osage University Partners, or OUP, and I'll be your moderator today. Today's webinar will highlight Entrepreneur in Residence programs and Mentor in Residence programs at 3 universities located in different ecosystems. So Katie, next slide. And I'm very thankful to have Dave Repp from University of Michigan, Alla McCoy from University of Maryland, and Bruce Burgess from University of Arizona today. And if you could go to the next slide, Katie. We'll start having everyone introduce themselves. So first, Dave, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jamie. I'm Dave Repp. I'm Associate Director of New Ventures at the University of Michigan Innovation Partnerships Office. And in my role, I've been here for 7 years. I focus on the life science portfolio of potential spinouts from the University of Michigan. Prior to joining the university, I led a molecular diagnostics startup here in Ann Arbor called Gemma Diagnostics. And then I also co-founded a startup that was a therapeutics startup called Vitamer Therapeutics that was based on technology out of the University of Michigan. So I've been on both sides of the fence.
Great, thank you, Dave. And Alla, can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Alla McCoy. I am Director of Startup Support at the University of Maryland's Ventures, which is the technology transfer arm of the university. So I actually joined the university first at the New England Center of Entrepreneurship, where I manage student programs, including EIR programs. And then when I switched over to Ventures, I launched startup support program, including EIR program there, and I will talk today about the similarities and differences. Look forward to this session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alla. And then Bruce.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Bruce Burgess. I'm Director of Venture Development with Tech Launch Arizona. We're the tech transfer office within the University of Arizona. My background is industry. I've been involved in life science startups throughout my career, involving mostly diagnostics and medical devices, but also some therapeutics. I've been involved with Tech Launch Arizona now for a little over 7 years formally and a couple of years informally before that, and I've thoroughly enjoyed kind of making the switch over from the industrial or commercial side of things to the academic side of things. So as a similar background to Dave, I've been involved on both sides of the equation.
Thank you, Bruce. And I just want to thank you all in advance today of sharing your knowledge and your backgrounds with us. And for the presentation today, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be available on OUP's partner portal, and a recording will also be publicly available via our YouTube channel. For those of you who do not know, OUP maintains an online portal for the tech commercialization offices at our partner institutions that's full of relevant tech transfer content. Once you're at the portal site, for which you will need to register if you have not already, you'll find a downloadable presentation deck and video link on the webinars page, which is going to be under the New Ventures section. And then our webinar today is really divided into 2 parts. The first is an overview of each university's program, and then after that will be a panel discussion. And I do want to encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar. Do not just submit them for the panel discussion. And if you could place your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom, we monitor the Q&A feature, not the chat feature for questions. So please place your questions in the Q&A feature throughout the webinar. And on that note, actually, Dave, why don't you start us off?
Great, thanks, Jamie. So today I'm going to talk about the University of Michigan's Mentors in Residence program. And Katie, if you'll advance to the first slide. I'd like to at least start with a bit of background and give some context on how our program started and has evolved over time. So the Mentor in Residence program was actually formed during the recession of the late 2000s. So it was formed in 2008, and it was a bit of a rough time here in southeastern Michigan. Two of the big three were looking for government bailouts, and Pfizer had actually just pulled out of its R&D facility here in Ann Arbor. In fact, it's the office where I'm sitting today. So the primary motivation of the mentor program had a lot to do with economic development. I think the office was looking to find a way to retain talent and help diversify the economy. So our previous director was looking for a way to do that, and at the same time was kind of concerned that the Office of Technology Transfer at the time was being thought of as IP police. And so he thought that having mentors in residence as trusted individuals with no dog in the hunt for the faculty to engage with would be beneficial. So that's where it started. The expected outcomes of the program were to really help improve our decision-making process for early stage technologies, expand and accelerate our new business ventures, obviously, expand our network to industry, and the investment pool, and also to improve the outcomes of our internal gap expenditures. So with generous funding from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, we formed initially with 4 mentors in residence. Over time, that has grown to now 12 mentors in residence who all sit here physically when we're in the office, sit here in Ann Arbor. But several of those mentors in residence are actually roving mentors in residence in the sense that they not only serve the University of Michigan projects, but they serve faculty and inventors at institutions throughout the state of Michigan. Since the group was formed in 2008, it has launched well over 200 new companies, and the mentors in residence have gone on to lead 11 of our startups. I just want to emphasize one point, and that's that leading, the mentors leading companies is a natural outcome, but not an emphasis of the program. They're mentors in residence rather than entrepreneurs in residence, intentionally. And over time, it's now become a very integral part of our office. The mentors work alongside the licensing counterparts at a very early stage, from pre-intellectual property all the way through the launch of the company and beyond. Next slide, please.
Dave, really quick, before you go on to your next slide, we have a question already.
Sure.
So what are your requirements for your mentors?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the mentors are actually half-time employees of the University of Michigan. So they actually are employees, not contractors or consultants. We want them to be physically able to come to campus, or at least that was sort of the requirement pre-COVID. I think going forward, that's still the idea, because we want them to be able to engage a portfolio of project teams. So they have to be willing to really work alongside multiple faculty. They also have to have come from a startup background, having founded startups. And then typically they also have a technical background as well, so that they can kind of speak the language of the inventors. So those are some of the qualifications we're looking for in mentors.
Thank you so much for answering that question.
Yeah, sure. So, just, to kind of dovetail onto that, I mentioned before, we've got 12 mentors in residence. And, if you look across the bios of the 12 mentors, you'll see that it really does span the variety of technology sectors. It's a bit of a mirror image of our licensing team. So we've got, life science and mentors, some with very deep therapeutics expertise, just as you would expect on our licensing team. Similarly, on the physical science side, we've got mentors with automotive expertise, same as on the licensing team. Recruiting mentors has never been too terribly difficult. We can, I guess, get to that maybe later, but we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of folks come to us. It's a matter of finding the right cultural fit for us. So back to what we look for in mentors, we're looking for mentors who really fit our culture and are not just someone that we can kind of add to our website. The best mentors are ones who have a greater sense of purpose and sort of a feeling of obligation to give back to the ecosystem.
Great. And Dave, we've actually had some more questions come in. So first, can you talk about the compensation that you're providing the mentors? And on top of that, sort of what type of hours and salary are they earning?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we're fortunate enough to get funding from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. The mentors earn effectively $50 an hour for the work they're putting in, and they're working roughly 20 hours per week, give or take. It just depends on the mentor, and it really depends on their workload. There's a lot of flexibility in how they put in that 20 hours a week, and it can be spread uneven over time. It just depends on the type of work that's required on a weekly basis.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then just another question that came in terms of compensation. Since they're only half-time employees, they're doing 20 hours, do you provide benefits in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, they do have access to benefits at the university. So they are, again, university employees. So there are some benefits that they have access to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we had another question come in about conflict of interest, but I'm actually going to save that to the end so all three of you can answer that, because that's something that comes up very routinely when we talk to our partner institutions.
Great.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, next slide. Yep. So one last slide for me. I just wanted to kind of walk through, a use case or a story that was a recent success story of an engagement between one of our mentors in residence and a project team. So Jim Arthurs, who's in the bottom left of the slide here, prior to joining our mentors in residence program, was actually a chief operating officer for one of our startups, Armune Bioscience. Armune was actually a company that had developed a prostate cancer diagnostic, and it was acquired by Exact Sciences in 2018. In my previous role, when I was running my own startup, I knew Jim very well and thought of him personally as a mentor. So as soon as his company was acquired by Exact, I jumped on the opportunity to recruit him as a mentor for our office. So he joined in 2018, and immediately, I connected him to another team at the University of Michigan who is developing a prostate cancer diagnostic. The prostate cancer diagnostic here is called My Prostate Score. So in December of 2018, he began sort of consultation with the team. The team had originally intended to commercialize and run the diagnostic out of the University of Michigan pathology labs. Jim quickly convinced them that there's a better way than running a commercial entity out of a university, and that they should be in control of their own destiny. And so he helped them kind of organize a strategy and figure out a way to spin out of the University of Michigan. Additionally, he connected them to a CLIA lab director he had worked with in the past. And so in late 2019, a company was formed and launched. And then our group collectively helped that entity, which became LinksDX, put together a pitch deck and pitched to investors locally. By December of 2019, the company had a term sheet from a venture firm. Now, what's interesting here is that in early 2020, just as the company had built out its CLIA lab, the world essentially broke, and they figured out pretty quickly that they could pivot from what they had intended to do to provide COVID testing. So again, this is where Jim really stepped up as an advisor to the company alongside the CLIA lab director and helped them make that pivot. And today the company is actually the largest COVID testing facility in the state of Michigan. They have 5 sites and the capacity to do over 100,000 tests. And then more recently, they have now gone back to where they started and have launched the My Prostate Score test commercially this past January. So, I think it provides a good example of where our mentor in resident really provided kind of an accelerant to a project team who may have had other ideas, but really got out the door much more quickly than they otherwise would have. And so that's the type of value that I think, as word gets out, the faculty here on campus understand that we have lots of ways of adding value, and including the MentorInResidence program. And so it's definitely an attractive feature of the Innovation Partnerships Office here at the University of Michigan.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. We do have some questions, but I am going to save some of them for the panel discussion because I think they'd be great for everyone to answer. So next, we're going to have Alla present a little bit about University of Maryland's program.
Thank you, and Dave, it was very interesting to learn about what you do at Michigan. So we have a slightly different programs. So if you can start on the first slide, please. So as you can see, University of Maryland has multiple entrepreneurship programs for a wide variety of audiences, from undergraduate students interested in dipping their toe to serious technology-based startups. I started my career at UMD at Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship, where I managed student programs and including EIRs. We had a group of somewhere between 5 and 9 unpaid EIRs who spend different amount of time with our students. When I switched my career to UM Ventures, which is the technology transfer arm of the university, they didn't have an EIR program or any type of startup program, but the need was apparent. So we got funding from our VPR office to launch EIR program. And these EIRs we needed a different level of commitment from them. And just different level of work and effort that they put in, and thus we launched it as a paid program. These EIRs spend time mostly with high-tech faculty startups, and we needed a much higher level of commitment. So we created a paid contract EIR position, which requires 16 hours a month, and I'll talk about more details later. Recently, our partner at the University of Maryland, an incubator called MTech, actually offered to pay for additional EIR hours, and I will be managing those. We also received EDA grant to expand our program, and I will discuss that in a few minutes as well. Also, our Alumni Association recently launched online mentorship platform using PeopleGrow software. And that's where alumni are asked to join and provide advice and mentor one another. Next slide, please. I will talk a little bit about unpaid versus paid programs. So usually there's a question whether one is more effective than the other. And in my experience, unpaid volunteer EIRs are best for undergraduate student programs. They usually sign an LOA, They usually give an official title, they put on the website, they have a business card that they can show, and they're quite happy with that as a compensation. They usually meet with students who are very enthusiastic and fun to work with. And unpaid structure allows for much greater flexibility on how many EIRs you can bring on. It's easy to onboard them. It's also easy to separate. And obviously, you don't need to find additional funding, which is usually the bottleneck. The problem with this model is that EIRs who are unpaid usually have a lower level of commitment. They can easily cancel an appointment, which is okay if it's an undergraduate student, but not okay if it's a faculty member or somebody interested in taking a technology and spinning out of university. So another problem with unpaid programs, where people work with students, is they sometimes get tired of hearing the same cookie delivery business idea or textbook exchange app. So they kind of lose their steam and lose interest. That said, I know this question has been brought up. Development officers, especially at the business school at the University of Maryland, they love using student startup advising opportunity as a hook to get attention and bring well-to-do alumni entrepreneurs and other business leaders to campus and start the conversation with them and get them involved. Next slide. So for the paid programs, when I was launching EIR program at the Tech Transfer Office, it became clear that we needed a much higher level of serious commitment from EIRs. So we received funding from VPR office for all the reasons that Dave mentioned earlier. We didn't want to be no longer seen to be as a patent police on campus, but more as a partner and also as the economic development engine. So paid EIRs sign an official contract. It has scope of work, and it allows for a higher level of commitment and accountability, and also allows to build deeper relationship with startups. EIRs also get deeper level of satisfaction from work because they get a glimpse at the newest and best technologies developed at the university labs. They get to talk to scientists, and they get to help them figuring out what these new innovations could be and help them bring them to market. Sometimes these relationships result in investments or EIR joining in board or other capacity. But we do recognize that as a conflict of interest and manage it by basically they remove work that they do with that startup from their EIR hour obligations. There are challenges, of course. It is more difficult to find people who are both qualified and are willing to commit to this arrangement. There's a procurement process that can be lengthy, and some candidates find contractual obligations to be problematic, especially the confidentiality clause, which we have. And of course, you have to find money to pay for these positions, so that's another challenge. Next slide. And these are details about our specific program. So our EIRs are paid $1,500 monthly flat fee. We tried doing hourly, but that proved to be more complicated and cumbersome, so we switched to flat fee. Due to varying demand for EIR services, they don't work the entire 12 months. Some months, especially January and summer months, we have one EIR on call, and they take turns on who's going to be on call that particular month. They are available not only to our faculty and startups, but also our tech managers, licensing team in Tech Transfer Office find it helpful to meet with them to figure out what product or service a specific technology could be and how to market it. So we bring them via sole source justification process. We find that RFP is not efficient for this particular, and I can answer questions as to why if anybody wants to know. They sign one contract, which includes financial, legal, confidentiality, and COI terms, and it's renewable annually. Next slide, please. So these are a subset of our EIRs. As you can see, we have very high standards for our EIRs. They all are cashed out entrepreneurs who built successful, recognizable startups. They also failed spectacularly and have, those lessons learned as well. So this is a subsection of our EIRs that are more traditional EIR role. We have one more in the onboarding in the contract process. We also have 3 mentors called site miners who are dedicated specifically to technology validation and company formation program financed by the state of Maryland, and they're paid out of that program as well. So again, they're all cashed out, experienced entrepreneurs, and one of them, Laura Newman, is actually currently running for governor of Maryland. So it's really exciting, which of course she kind of stepped out from her EIR hours for a few months to see what happens. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are looking for funding, I wanted to bring this to your attention. So we recently applied and received EDA University Center grant. And specifically, we're using that money to expand our EIR program, our workshop program, and I-Corps to other universities in the state of Maryland. So with that money, we're hiring 2 additional EIRs at the University of Maryland, and each of our partners hires 1. And we are pulling all of these EIRs and making them available to one another, which is really exciting for all of us. So all of these, so we're sharing best practices with our partners on how to do that. All of them have the same SOW, and they will be more closely aligned with I-Corps cohorts serving as mentors and using the I-Corps methodology. So for you, if you're looking for funding, I recommend that you look into this opportunity. Next slide.
Actually, really quick, we have a question about that. Is that EDA University Center grant Maryland specific grant thing, or is it a national program?
It's a national program. It's a national program available nationwide, and they have announcements throughout the year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so I didn't provide here specific examples, but how we count success is, so we, if our EIR convinces one of our faculty member not to be the CEO and then find somebody else they could partner with to lead the company, we count that as a success. So we do provide, do CEO matches and CEO partners, business partners. 7 of our startups recently, we found CEO partners for them, and that's a big deal for us. We welcome investments by our EIRs, and of course they have to be managed because of the conflict of interest. Many companies received help during fundraising, including pitch coaching, investor intros, help understanding terms that investors present them with, and help even advising them on how to negotiate those. Also, our EIRs are involved in I-Corps program by serving as mentors during both regional and national programs. And in general, we find that many develop very deep relationships, which of course makes it difficult to track hours because they'll go and spend a day with a company and then forget to tell me. So, but I love that. That's a good problem to have. So, in general, I find that, having an EIR program is really important to develop a startup ecosystem at the university. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Alla, we have had a lot of great questions come through, but I do want to save a lot of them for the panel discussion because they're to all of you. But specifically for you, how serious are student entrepreneurs, and what commitment does the university have to help them as the students likely own the IP? So really addressing, since the students own the IP, how serious are they, and how much should the university do to help them?
So on our campus, Dingman Center and some of the others like Do Good Institute are more focused on students, and they do own their own IP. Some of them become serious. Many of them are just interested in dipping their toe. Many of them are interested in pitching, or and some of them do start companies. So it really depends. They're fun to work with for a little bit. And so Ventures, so we do not mostly work with students. Students have opportunity to assign their IP to the university if they have something that we are actually interested in working with. And we do have a startup that came out of that effort that is they're selling high efficiency stoves. But that's one example that I can think of in terms of where students assigned IP and it was valuable IP that was patentable and they were serious about starting a business, found a CEO. So yeah, we have one example of that, but we do have other great student businesses, somewhere from product-based, food-based and such.
Perfect. Thank you, Alla. And I think on that note, we're going to go to Bruce now, and he could talk about University of Arizona's program.
Thank you, Jamie. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. I wanted to share with you just quickly, this is our new home. Hopefully later this spring when they finish it up, assuming we don't have any other material or work shortage that is common with the current pandemic. It's part of a new tech park called the Burgess that the university has invested in. So we're very fortunate to have the support of the university in our commercialization efforts. We're not going to totally occupy the building, obviously. We have a small incubator as well as other university research taking place there. The second building hopefully will have additional incubator space as well as some wet lab space, which is always in high demand. Next slide. I wanted to give you a little background as well, just to give some context to Tech Launch Arizona, as we're a fairly new organization. We're established just 9 years ago. We're in our 10th year of operation. And we're focused solely on university IP. And by that, I mean, for student engagement, we have a separate organization within the university called Arizona Forge. So they work with student entrepreneurial efforts that don't involve university IP. And we also have a separate incubator as part of our Tech Park Arizona that handles both university startup spinouts as well as community industry spinouts. So our group came together kind of all at the same time. It wasn't an add-on in terms of the venture development effort. We're organized into the basic functions of our licensing and IP, which is our core. We have a marketing group dedicated towards tech marketing, as well as our internal and external communications, our event coordination and the like. Finance and admin, obviously, is the glue that holds us together. And then I oversee the venture development group. It's myself and 2 venture development managers and 4 MIRs currently. And we have a number of support programs that I want to touch upon briefly as well. Next slide. So our Mentor-in-Residence program, we began back in 2016. We started with 3. We're currently at 4. Similar to Michigan's program, our MIRs, our university employees, are half-time. They're paid very similar scale and do have access to full university benefits, being a half-time employee. From a conflict of interest standpoint, we make the rule that they not be involved directly in our startups to maintain that separation. Our MIRs also do not get involved in any of the license negotiation, so they don't end up in the kind of who do they represent, helping the company or helping the university. They stay out of those license negotiations to make sure there's no conflict there. Now, we have on occasion had some of our MIRs step out and take a role in the startups. We've had 4, I think, to date. And at that point, we do ask them to step out of the MIR role to avoid that conflict. In terms of their background and experience, we're looking for people, again, that have been there, done that. These are typically presidents and CEOs who have formed and been successful with early stage startups. And they're semi-retired or retired, looking to give back. And many of them are very technology curious. They really like seeing what's new coming out of the university and possibly seeing if there's something that would interest them to kind of roll up their sleeves and get back in the game. We keep our group industry focused. You can see the 4 areas that we have right now, 2 in the life sciences, 1 in physical, and then the 4th in software and data systems. Our pipeline allows our MIRs to average about 12 to 15 startup projects each at any given point in time. And similar to Michigan's program, they guide our project teams through the entire startup process from the very first contact indicating interest all the way through the license and even post-license to help guide them and direct them in making contacts, funding arrangements, and funding contacts as well. Next slide, please. But we can't do that with just our MIRs alone. We have a number of key support programs. We have a Student Entrepreneurial Fellow program. These are graduate students that are very interested in entrepreneurship. We assign them to each of our MIRs. They work quarter time, and we embed them with our project team. So they get sort of the hands-on involvement of being a part of the team and working through all the different challenges and efforts and work that needs to be done as part of that team. We're also very fortunate to have the support of the Grad College. They support our entrepreneurial fellows with a $10,000 tuition scholarship per year. So we ask them for 1-year commitment. Many of them have been on for more than 1 year. We also have a group of what we refer to as commercialization partners. This is a volunteer group, typically business leaders in the community. It's a variable time commitment. They're not paid. We do ask them to sign an NDA. But they are free, and we do encourage them to be a part of the startup effort. So they get involved with our projects either as advisors or become team members in the group. And actually, the ability to do remote over the past couple of years has allowed us to expand our commercialization partners beyond just our local community. But we now have commercialization partners nationwide across a number of different industries. So it's really allowed us to expand our reach and scope. And we also have our NSF I-Corps program that was started back in 2016, and our commercialization partners often take a key role in mentoring our teams through the I-Corps program, both at our site program and the national program. Next slide. And then we also have what we refer to as our network of domain experts. These are folks that we've identified and keep a relationship with that really have deep industry experience and can provide guidance and advice. So much of the technology coming out of the university is so specific that it really benefits us to be able to reach out to these folks to really get key insights into how best we can bring these forward and make them commercially successful. And obviously, no startup organization can be successful without community collaborators to help us along that path once the startup licenses the IP from the university, and they are very committed to seeing the university growth for our ecosystem and fully support our TLA mission. And then I want to also touch upon a very important part of our support program, and that's a program we started back in 2019 called Claim Your Seat at the Table, which really emphasizes diversity, inclusion, and broad engagement across all our efforts. It starts not only with our own organization at TLA, but also reaching out to our inventors to make sure we're getting engagement across the university from all our faculty inventors, including our MIRs, our student fellows, our community collaborators, all the way across the board. It's really been a key part of our program, and I wanted to touch upon that as well. Next slide. So just give you a brief overview of our primary metrics. These are metrics that the university president follows and is also reported to our Board of Regents. As I mentioned, we're only 9 years old, but we kind of started not from ground zero, but from not a fully engaged point. The tech transfer office prior to us was understaffed and underfunded, so we had a very low point of faculty engagement. So the first couple of years were actually a lot of outreach and education to our faculty to kind of come up to speed. Just to give you an idea, over the past 9 years, we've close to doubled the number of invention disclosures. That first year, we had 3 startups launched. Over the past 2 years, we had 36 startups launched just in the past 2 fiscal years. So we've made some really good strides in that regard. And the MIR program has been key to our startup success there, as well as all the other support programs that we brought on over those period of years. So with that, I'll conclude and turn it back over to you, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bruce, I do have a few questions specifically for you before we get into our panel discussion.
Okay.
So someone said, so Bruce, your mentors can lead startups, but as long as they leave their paid mentor position, correct?
Correct. So if they decide to take a role in the startup directly, then we ask them to leave the MIR role to avoid any conflict.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then You did mention that your mentors are compensated. Can you talk about what their compensation looks like?
It's pretty much, it's basically $50,000 a year. It's half-time, and they do have access to full university benefits.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to lead into our panel discussion today. Before I start asking our great panelists some questions, I do want to highlight that these slides will be available on our YouTube channel, on our OUP partner portal for those who have access at the tech commercialization offices. And then also for every registrant, we will send these slides out afterwards. So let's get into our panel discussion. So we have gotten a lot of great questions. And the first one I want to go to, Bruce, you mentioned a little bit about it, but conflict of interest. So, you know, what does your institution think about conflict of interest for your EIRs or your MIRs? And do they represent the university, the faculty interests, the company, or others? And Dave, I'm going to shoot this one off at you since, you know, you brought it up when we were prepping for this.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, you know, again, so the mentors in residence are university employees, so they do have to go through the same sort of conflict of interest, conflict of management process that any university employee would have to. They do represent the University of Michigan, you know, but they, in their role, they're looking out for the best interest, quite often, of the faculty inventor. But again, you know, they, as University of Michigan employees, if there is a conflict of interest or conflict of commitment, they do have to report that as any employee would.
And Alla, can you mention about University of Maryland's conflict of interest policy?
Sure. So at the University of Maryland, our EIRs are not employees, they're contractors. So that removes some of the obligations. However, we do ask that if we do ask them to disclose it to us. And if they either invest or join the company in any capacity, then they just cannot no longer report that or count it toward their hourly obligations. We encourage those conflicts. We love it when it happens, when they invest. In most cases, it's just usually an investment or maybe a board of advisors or something like that.
And Bruce, is there anything you want to add about COI?
No, I think it's already been touched upon. We're very similar to what Dave mentioned at the University of Michigan. All our MIRs are employees. They come under the same conflict of interest, conflict of commitment requirements that any university employee has. Our commercialization partners are volunteers. So we actually encourage them to get involved. And we have not had any issues of conflict of interest there.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to go a little bit into sort of the mechanics of your program. So Alla, do you want to explain the difference between an EIR and an MIR? What's the difference between an entrepreneur in residence and a mentor in residence? And are they the same or do they have different expectations?
So in our case, we are calling them entrepreneurs in residence, and I know at other universities they'll look at them differently. At other universities, I've seen where mentors in residence are more what we call entrepreneurs in residence, and EIRs are more people who are actually looking for their next opportunity for a startup to join. So our EIRs are called entrepreneurs in residence because we found it, a better way to communicate what they do and who they are. They are entrepreneurs who are available for questions and mentorship opportunities. But we don't necessarily have that distinguishing characteristics. Maybe Dave, I think you alluded that you have both.
Actually, yeah, we only have mentors in residence currently. We at one point in time we did try an EIR program, or at least piloted it with a couple individuals, and found that it didn't work as well. As you mentioned, the distinction is an EIR is somebody who's looking for their next startup role, startup opportunity. And so what we found was the entrepreneur would get to campus and would only focus on one particular project, whereas the mentors really do focus on a portfolio of technologies. There's anywhere from 12 to 20 technologies. The other issue was, if we have if we had an entrepreneur in residence that was a bad fit, it created a conflict between the inventor and our office, actually. So we just would rather have a mentor-in-residence program where there's not as much opportunity for that lack of fit. Bruce?
Yeah, well, we also have just the mentor-in-residence program is sort of the identified program. A lot of our team members around our startups come from our commercialization partners. And then in addition, reaching out to our community. We have a lot of reach through our partners, both internally and externally there. And like with any matchmaking process, you work very hard to find the fit. And if the fit isn't there, you have to kind of move on to find the right fit to the benefit of the faculty members.
Okay, and Bruce, I'm actually going to start you off with this next question. How do you match your mentors to your teams?
Talking about our mentors, our mentors are assigned based on the technology. Is that the question you have?
Yeah, how do you match them to what technology?
Yeah, because we have an industry focus, it's pretty straightforward most times to match up one of our mentors with faculty members. And they have, develop a very close relationship with our faculty as well, which is extremely beneficial over time. But there are some cases where, technologies cross boundaries a little bit. And we have on occasion had more than one mentor involved on a team, simply because the expertise involved benefited from having the knowledge base of, say, software and something in medical devices or something in the diagnostic space. Where it really benefited from kind of having them partner up together on that particular project.
And then Alla, how do you do your matchmaking?
Similar, so based on the industry expertise, experience, and also what type of services do they need. So we have one of our EIRs is better for if you have a technology but you don't know what to do and you need help throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what can happen with it. So he's better at brainstorming, and some others are better at sitting down and helping them through the plan. But again, it's mostly dependent on expertise. And sometimes we send them to all of our EIRs for pitch coaching, for example. They have to go and pitch to everybody and get feedback, kind of round robin. So it really depends.
And Dave, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, really very similar to both Alla and Bruce. To an extent, there's usually an obvious fit. The way that our process works is usually I'll meet with the inventor alongside our licensing manager, and then between the licensing manager and myself, we kind of discuss the needs of the project and who we think might be the good fit. But again, very similar in the sense that there's no territorialism amongst our mentor group. That's another differentiating factor between EIR program and MIR program. So we can put as many MIRs on a program as we need to, or just have one.
Yeah, definitely. And then Dave, I'll give you the next question. From the internal perspective, who manages the program and how much of their time does it take?
Right. Yeah. So there are two associate directors, myself, and I'm on the life science side, and then Don Manfredi on the physical science side. So between the two of us, we kind of manage the mentors connections and effort. It does take a significant amount of our time, as you might imagine, with the number of projects that are ongoing. So I'd say, keeping track of projects and really engaging the MIRs is at least half of the time I spend in the office.
And then Bruce, how about you?
From a personnel standpoint, it's myself, and I have two venture development manager positions that kind of oversee one, the life science side of the equation, similar to Michigan, the other physical sciences and software. So it's split up probably 40-50% in direct support of the MIR in current projects. One of our managers also supports and teaches the ICOR program, so very involved in that. And we also do a lot of support for our licensed startups to continue to support them, make them aware of resources that are available, help make connections to them where they need connections. So it kind of spans the full breadth. And there is a little bit of effort that we also put into play with our MIRs, also with our licensing managers, to help them with finding licensing opportunities, because they do have industry experience and can oftentimes help make connections for our licensing managers in finding good homes for some of our technologies to license.
And then Alla, how about you?
So I manage the EIR program and the SiteMiner program myself, and it takes a good amount of time. It takes a good chunk of my time managing the relationship with MIRs, making sure they get introductions to faculty, and that those meetings are happening and facilitated. So, to make it work, you have to put an effort into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And we've gotten a lot of great questions. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer all of them today because we are over 15 right now. But one that has come up repeatedly is about diversity. And Bruce, you touched a little bit on it. But Dave, how about you? How are you addressing diversity within your teams and also within your EIR or your MIRs?
Right. Yeah. So I really am curious to hear more about Bruce's Claim Your Seat at the Table program. Because I think that diversity is one of our most acute pain points. It's difficult for us to recruit a diverse set of mentors and residents. And it's very important that we do. Going back to something that I said earlier, that it's important that the mentors are seen as peers to the inventors. So not only can they speak the same technical language, but they're seen as, again, peers in other ways to our inventors. So it is a pain point for us, and it's something that we've begun addressing far more systematically than in the past. So we've begun keeping a curated database of entrepreneurs in our ecosystem, diverse entrepreneurs in our ecosystem, and really trying to find alternative ways of engaging them, even if we can't bring them in as mentors and residents. As an example, we have a seed fund on campus called Accelerate Blue. The seed fund has an investment advisory board composed almost entirely of entrepreneurs, and in that way, we're able to bring in a far more diverse set of entrepreneurs into the advisory board than we are, with our mentor program at this time. And our most recent hire came from that board, so it has had a benefit in that way. But I am interested in hearing how Bruce's program works.
No, definitely. Bruce, do you mind going in depth about your program a little bit?
It's part program and it's part mindset. We do a number of different programs on campus as well as community and campus focused to get engagement from as broad a spectrum of interested parties as we can. And similar to what Dave said, we want to make sure that our faculty see sort of the same representation in all our efforts that they see internally. And that's can be obvious from all the different demographics, but younger researchers sometimes equate better with younger MIRs or younger collaborators. It's just a conscious effort every time we engage in one of our programs to have in the back of our mind, are we really addressing all our constituency in this process, and making a conscious effort to do that. That may sound a bit simplistic, but it's keeping it at the forefront of our thinking in all the things that we do.
Mm-hmm. And then Alla, how are you addressing diversity with your program?
It's definitely on the forefront of our mind. Like Dave said, we also having difficulty recruiting people from diverse backgrounds for these positions. And it's especially becoming important now since our EDA expansion. We're working mostly with our partners are HBCU or minority serving organizations. So we're trying to make sure that the new EIRs that join represent that and would be seen as peers and be more, more aligned with those institutions. But it is proven challenging. So would love to hear more and learn more about Bruce's program.
No, thank you. Thank you, Bruce, for sharing that program today. So we are quickly coming up at 1 p.m. So Katie's going to put a survey in the chat. We really appreciate if before people drop off to fill out that chat. And if you don't mind, we'll just go about 5 minutes over or in the chat, the survey, please. And we're just going to go about 5 minutes over and answer 2 more questions to end out the session. And there have been a lot of great questions asked that we will not get to today. So we will try to follow up with people after the webinar. But sort of quick round robin, given what you have learned, if you could start from zero, how would you build a program from scratch? So Dave, or maybe even do it like, what would you change or what would you do differently?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think the focus on culture is most important to us, and I think one of the key learnings over time is to look for mentors that fit that culture. And I think what I mean by that is a mentor who wants to be a part of something bigger. And our mentors actually really enjoy working together and collaborating and spending time together and learning from one another. And so, I think very, very early on in my time here, that was something that I picked up on and that we've focused on is finding the mentors who, really kind of fit the culture of our program. So again, that may be simplistic answer, but it is super important that we don't have lone wolves out there, that we have a group.
Bruce, what would be focus or do-over you would do?
I'm not sure of a do-over, but some of the important things that have really made a difference for us is having the dedicated internal resources and the supportive leadership in the college deans. Can't be overlooked. And we've been fortunate to have really strong support from the president on down, including above that to our Board of Regents, as well as the deans of each of the colleges. Makes a huge difference because, what they say and what they do reflects strongly on faculty and their interest in getting engaged with us. We're also very fortunate to have some state funding. It's called TRIF funding. It's Arizona Technology Research Initiative Fund that helps support what we do. So having that dedicated effort, I think, makes a big difference. To have them as part of our team as an employee makes a big difference. Obviously, having an engaged ecosystem is vitally important to our success. That didn't exist to a strong extent in Tucson. It's growing and it's building, and we're very pleased to be a part of that growth. And then obviously access to capital resources is a big challenge for everybody. And that's something that is the remote has actually helped us some in that regard, of making it much easier to access capital, because capital is more comfortable working remotely. So I'll leave it at that.
And then Alla.
We're actually helping our EDA partners figure out how to launch EIR programs on their campuses, and a lot of work is around what Dave said is culture. What do you need? Who will be using EIR services? Who needs them? What is the culture at your particular university? What is the expertise that needed? And so depending on that, we are adjusting they're adjusting on how they view the EIR candidates and how they select it. But I think cultural fit, the expertise fit is important. And in terms of what I would change, I think more support toward what Bruce said, more financial and logistical support from the university is always needed.
Yeah. And a lot of you addressed this already, but I'm going to end the webinar with this question. If, money was not an object, you had budget for anything, and you could wave a magic wand and have a wish, what would your wish be? And I'll start with you.
An assistant, somebody to help me manage the program, that would be real nice. And also a well-functioning software to keep track of. I haven't found any that serve my particular needs, but any kind of software that would help manage the EIR program more better than what we currently have would be nice.
Yeah. How about you, Bruce?
So many of our faculty founders are taking the burden early stage to de-risk their technology, and that involves a lot of SBIR work, STTR work. And so we're continually working to be able to fund resources to help them in that regard, because that's a new environment for them. They're used to research grants. They're not used to SBIR, STTR grants. But yet for life sciences, that early funding through those grant programs is really critical to do some of the early de-risking of the technology. So that's one of the things that we're currently working on to bolster that even further.
And then Dave.
I was chuckling a little bit at Alla's answer, because having a good CRM would be helpful, and having mentors who would actually use it would be amazing. But I think that's going a bit too far. I think so I asked the mentors this question as well, and one of the responses that they gave me is they'd like more gap funding, to put toward proof of concept development, or validating studies, which is always nice to have more funding, but the more you have, the more complicated it is to manage. The other thing that that we have added in the last couple of years is an analyst program, and that has actually paid huge dividends. So we've got an analyst who works alongside with the mentors and can do a lot of the I guess you'd call it market research or financial modeling. Things that the mentors themselves probably wouldn't normally dabble in. So that's been a boon for our program.
Okay. Thank you so much. So first, I want to mention that we do have the survey in the chat. We really pay attention to all the survey results. This webinar came out of a suggestion on a survey. So please fill out that survey. And then we did not get to every question today. So I do want to say that we will try to follow up with people individually, or maybe, do a blog piece or something after this to address all the great questions we got today. And lastly, I just want to thank Alla, Dave, and Bruce. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules today and helping share your expertise. And I want to thank the audience for sticking in there with us and participating in this webinar and providing all your great questions. And everyone's contact information is now up. So if you have any follow-up questions, also feel free to reach out to any of the panelists. So thank you so much for today, and thank you for attending OUP's webinar.